please take a seat in the forum for the Sybil Steinberg dedication ceremony.
Good afternoon. How is everyone this afternoon? Nice to have you here. We appreciate you coming out. Welcome to StoryFest, Connecticut's largest literary festival, and this year a particularly special one. My name is Bill Harmer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Westport Library. Today we gather not only to celebrate the written word, but to honor the memory of a true literary icon and beloved member of our community and a dear friend to the Westport Library, Sybil Steinberg, whom this year's festival is dedicated to. The first time I met Sybil was shortly after I had taken on this new responsibility and role as the executive director here at the library about 9 years ago. My family and I had just moved to Connecticut from Michigan, where I had been running a pretty highly regarded library there. And when I told my staff in Michigan about my new position in Westport, I remember one of the younger librarians on staff, Sarah was her name. She approached me with wide eyes and a big smile on her face, practically buzzing with excitement. Bill, she said, "Did you know that Sybil Steinberg lives in Westport?" I admitted that I did not know that fact, and she went on to tell me that Sybil had been her literary hero and that I was incredibly lucky to be working in the same community as her. So I promised her that if I ever had the good fortune and honor of meeting Sybil, that I would pass along my admiration to her. That moment came sooner than I had expected it would. In fact, not long after settling in, I finally met Sybil. And let me tell you, I was a little nervous. I mean, here we are talking about the Sybil Steinberg, someone whose opinion had shaped the careers of countless authors, and to an extent, my own career as a librarian. So I couldn't help but wonder, what is she gonna think about me? Am I gonna measure up? Is she gonna give me a literary quiz to test my prowess? And should I have brushed up on my Tolstoy? So Sybil and I met for coffee in the library's cafe, and after exchanging a few pleasantries, she said to me, "Bill, I want you to know that I have done my research on you." Well, that comment about froze me in place. I started thinking to myself that, oh no, what if she found out about those god-awful poems that I had published in that now-defunct literary magazine? Or what if she read some of the cringe-worthy author interviews I did for our college newspaper? Well, how am I ever gonna explain myself? She's gonna think that I'm a complete idiot. Instead, she just smiled and began to share with me how impressed that she had been with the work that I had done with my library in Michigan and with the work that I had done in my career up to that point. She then assured me that she trusted my ability to lead the library and preserve its incredible legacy. Well, needless to say, those words melted away any anxiety that I had. And we ended up having a lovely conversation. I think it was Sybil's way of welcoming me into the community, and it meant more to me than she could have ever known. Sybil Steinberg's influence on the world of books and publishing was monumental. As a senior editor at Publishers Weekly, she was a tastemaker who shaped the landscape of American fiction. Her reviews, particularly her starred reviews, became the gold standard for readers and librarians alike. Sybil's keen eye for talent brought groundbreaking authors to the forefront like Amy Tan, and her interviews with literary giants such as Salman Rushdie, John Updike, and Annie Proulx are legendary. But Sybil, as we know, was more than an editor. She was a curator of stories that touched lives, a voice we trusted, a light that guided us through the endless sea of literature. As a librarian, I can personally attest to her far-reaching influence. In the 1990s, when I began my career in libraries, Sybil was nothing short of a rock star in our industry. Every librarian knew her name. If Sybil starred a book, we didn't think twice about adding that book to our collections. Her word was as good as gold, and we knew that any book that she recommended was going to resonate deeply with our readers. Even after her retirement, Sybil's passion for literature didn't wane. She continued sharing her insights through Sybil's List, featuring her personal recommendations for must-read books in a series of live discussions that became a cherished tradition here at the Westport Library. Her talks drew eager and large crowds as she guided us toward new and noteworthy titles across many genres. Sybil's List wasn't just about recommending books. It was about helping us discover stories that could change us, stories we might never have found on our own. And today we are pleased to offer you a special booklet compiled by the library featuring every book from Sybil's List for you to take home with you. Yeah, very cool. Copies are available in our book sale room located directly behind us, so please take one home with you today. You'll thank yourself later for doing that. We are also privileged to offer a unique piece of Sybil's legacy. Her family has graciously donated her personal collection of signed first editions and advanced readers' copies from some of the most revered authors. These books, available for purchase today in the room behind us, are more than just collector's items. They are a symbol of a life lived in the heart of literature. All proceeds will benefit StoryFest, ensuring that Sybil's legacy of fostering a love of reading and learning will continue to thrive. Now, I want to share one last personal experience that I had with Sybil. Before I do that, though, I just want to be straight with you. Not every encounter I had with Sybil was necessarily a pleasant one. Sybil was not afraid in sharing her opinions with me about the library. Not everything we did made her happy, apparently, and she was not timid at all about sharing her disapproval with me. I was reprimanded on more than one occasion, rest assured. But more often than not, she always had something pleasant to say to me or about our staff about the good work that we were doing here for our community. The last time I saw Sybil was about a year ago, last fall, a big event that we held at the library. The forum here was packed and buzzing with excitement. As I was mingling with the crowd, I felt a familiar gaze on me. I looked up and saw Sybil sitting near the front row, somewhere just behind where Jonathan is sitting now. Her eyes were focused on mine. She waved me over, and my heart began to race. Was I in trouble? Had I forgotten something important about the event tonight? When I reached her finally, she looked at me with that familiar warmth, and once again, her words absolutely took me by surprise. She said, "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you and what you've done for this community." Then she pulled me in for a hug and kissed me on the cheek. In that simple moment, I felt so seen and so appreciated, not just as a colleague, but as a friend. It was a heartfelt acknowledgement from one of my heroes and someone whose recognition meant the world to me. I'll always treasure that memory. In closing, Sybil's legacy lives on in each of us, in the readers who devoured the books that she championed, in the librarians who followed her guidance, and in every individual who believes in the transformative power of stories. So as we dedicate StoryFest 2024 to her memory, we celebrate not only her incredible contributions to the literary world, but also the lasting impact that she has had on this community. Thank you. It's my privilege now to introduce someone who knew Sybil well, her beloved friend and partner, Matt Sagal, who would like to come up and share a few memories about Sybil.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Okay. For most of you, those of you who don't know me, I had the joy of being Sybil's domestic partner in Westport for the 2 last years of her life. We lived in sin after she and I had developed a loving relationship after being pals in Florida for several years. After my wife's death in 2021, one thing led to another, and I found myself moving from the Boston area to Westport. We had hoped for many more years together, but it was not to be. Since this is a literary event, I thought it appropriate to talk about some of Sybil's literary secrets and some secrets about her other artistic interests that I think will be new to most people here. When we were Florida pals, we found that we shared many of the same artistic interests. We both loved opera and classical concerts. We were ardent museum goers. We both loved movies, both in theaters and streaming on television. I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But pre-Sybil, my own reading interests were very limited. Except for a wonderful course in world literature by Vladimir Nabokov while an undergraduate at Cornell, my literary background was near zero. I was trained as an engineer and a scientist and spent my working life in industrial research and related things. When I got my first iPad some years ago, I began reading while on a treadmill or elliptical in the gym. I mostly caught up on classics that I'd missed during my earlier life: Don Quixote, Moby Dick, and others. I did discover Dennis Lehane and Philip Roth, but that was about it for today's literature. My guilty pleasure was Scandinavian police procedurals. Then along came Sybil into my life. She quickly recognized my literary limitations and set out to improve my awareness and appreciation of contemporary literature. She introduced me to Hilary Mantel, Cormac McCarthy, Daniel Mason, James McBride, Carson Whitehead, Geraldine Brooks, and many others I had either never heard of or whose talents had eluded me up to that point in my life. Of course, those authors were well represented on Sybil's lists for a long time. I read slowly, since most of my reading is in the gym on the elliptical. A major problem over the 2 years we were together was that I could not keep up. Sybil added books to her list much faster than I could read them. Now for a few of Sybil's book secrets. First, we disagreed on a few books. I told her that I had been entranced by Where the Crawdads Sing, and I wondered why that never made it onto Sybil's list. Sybil gave me that Sybil glare well known to family and friends, and I discovered just now, well known to Bill Harmer as well. She sneered at my lack of good taste. She got to recognize some types of fiction I didn't like. An example was Crossroads, which I slogged through based on Sybil's glowing recommendation. She got pretty good at predicting what I would like or dislike. There is one book on Sybil's list that she and I discovered together, Independent People by Nobel Prize winner Haldor Laxness. We had come across a piece on Laxness in the New Yorker, and we both read it at the same time. I and my trusty iPad in the gym, and Sybil in a book, which she much preferred to an electronic version. There is one book on Sybil's list that is there because I told her about it. The Cellist of Sarajevo by Stephen Galloway. I was a bit chagrined that Sybil never gave me public credit for those two masterpieces appearing on Sybil's list. So now you know. In turn, I tried to start a Sybil improvement program to make up for her shortcomings in knowledge of science. As many know, she was a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Smith College as an English major. She took one science course, astronomy, because she had to take one. It was the only grade less than an A she got in 4 years. But some of that stuck in her head. We would go out and look at the sky in the evening, and she would point at something and say, "That's Venus." I was always impressed with that and never doubted her. Early on, I gave Sybil a list of books on contemporary science written for intelligent readers with limited science backgrounds. Topics including physics, chemistry, biology, math, written by distinguished scientists that are talented writers. I even bought a few of those books for her. She never read any of them. Her excuse was that she was too busy with an upcoming Sybil's list. Actually, she was also watching too much television with me. Now for TV. Sybil tended to get hooked on a few series. When Succession was first on, no one, myself or any guest that happened to be with us on a Sunday evening, could disturb Sybil at 9 p.m. when the next segment of Succession was on. She and I both loved Mozart in the Jungle, which I recommend to music lovers who haven't seen it. While she had watched The Sopranos before I came along, I could never get her interested in Breaking Bad. In the fall of 2023, I happened to come across NYPD Blue, which I was aware of but had never seen. I turned on episode 1, season 1, while she was sitting next to me on the couch, and I assumed she would not care for it. I said that I would figure out some time to watch it when she was doing something else, like reading. She watched the first episode with me and was hooked on it. It became an obsession for Sybil. She got deeply involved with the main characters, their professional and personal trials and tribulations. She would talk to the television set. "Her hair is awful. She's bad news. Stay away from her." Or, "He's not the guy for you." When Detective Simone died, sadly, she was in tears. And when I said, "You know, the reason they killed Detective Simone off was because the actor didn't want to play the part anymore," and she sobbed through the tears, "I don't care. They shouldn't have killed him off." During the last few months of 2023, we binged on the first 10 seasons. That's a lot of television. We went to Florida. We continued into season 11 out of 12, as I recall. until she came down with her final illness. While she was in the hospital, she urged me to watch episodes alone and then tell her what happened. I refused, telling her that NYPD Blue would be on hold until she got well and could come home. That didn't happen. After Sybil's death, I watched the rest of NYPD Blue by myself, but Sybil's spirit was with me. Thank you.
So nice you could all be here today. I see so many familiar faces. Though I have to say, the crowd for Sybil's list are usually larger. To think that there will not be another Sybil's list, I'm sure grieves all of us, because she was a touchstone to the entire literary tradition. I want to start by thanking Matt for having been such a wonderful partner to my mother these past 2 years. I think his sense of humor was an important leavening factor during that whole time. And if anybody wonders, when you're listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, where Peter Sagal got his sense of humor from, that's the guy. And Bill, I want to thank you as well. Your remarks brought back a lot of fresh memories and made me more greatly appreciate the role she had in the publishing industry and the stature that she had. And I'm actually glad to hear that you and I have something in common, because believe it or not, I've been reprimanded by her a number of times as well. And I want to acknowledge my wife, my brother Peter, Susanna, who are here representing the family. I'm sure we all have stories we could tell. But I'll just make the understatement of the century. My mother loved books. I'm not so sure loved is even a strong enough word in this context. Maybe it's loved or something along those lines. From a very early age, books were her passion. Right through college, and right out of college, she got married. Very traditional in that generation, and raised 3 boys before she even contemplated a real career. I remember very distinctly being dragged to the old library. Remember the old library? There's still people here who remember that, on Main Street. And I would gravitate to the atlases so I could look at pictures versus having to read at the age of 5 or 6. But her commitment to this library in its various manifestations has been consistent and passionate. And if she gave you grief, Bill, it was only because she had a high standard for what this library was about. She was afraid with this grand transformation with movie studios and all this stuff, it was, don't forget about the books. The books are what really still matter here. And as an old traditionalist who doesn't listen to a lot of audiobooks, having that physical thing in my hand will always remind me of her. I'd have to say that for her, books were more than just a passion for literature. They were a part of her being. Raising 3 boys with rambunctious instincts, playing ball in the house, destroying antiques left and right. She had her refuge, the den, her sanctuary, where lined with books and where opera was always playing. And she could separate herself from some of the less salutary aspects of bringing up 3 boys in Westport, Connecticut. And maybe by osmosis, it seems that I prefer classical music and reading books to many other things. Reading books was really not a choice for any of us. There were always books available. There was always an expectation if you had nothing else to do, you should be reading a book. Now, she seems to have come around, Matt, with this idea of television. But back then, it was the scourge of our family. So, you know, it's nice to see she loosened up a little bit. Most of you here have had the benefit of hearing her rendition of Sybil's List, which would pack into an hour and a half, more books than you think possible, rendered word perfect, some form of long form haiku that she was able to just put it all out there, and you would all come away usually with annotations all over the place. I have a desk drawer just full of Sybil's List, so I'm glad there's an amalgamated one I can take home instead. And it's very hard for me now to pick up a book because I would be normally looking for her recommendation, because she knew my taste too. She knew what I loved and what I didn't care for as much, though she did try to stretch me as well on occasion. For us growing up, she was mom, and she didn't have a career like the one we're all celebrating until I was in college and my brothers were older. For her, she felt very strongly about fulfilling her obligation in a generation where women were struggling with determining whether they could have full careers. And she made that transition organically with a lot of small steps. But then when she got to review books for Publishers Weekly, she was in a groove. She was able to do her passion, read 4, 5, 6 books a week, not just read them quickly, but with comprehension and with insight as to what the author was trying to accomplish, and she could communicate that to others. Her reviews, as Bill said, were the standard, and maybe we here didn't appreciate how important that was to the publishing industry, but she was a titan in the industry during those years. I can't really express how much I miss her on a daily basis, but I also like to believe that all of you here miss her in some way as well, because she was not only a member of this community and showed up at a lot of events, you know, I show up at a lot of events too, but I used to run into her all the time because she was just doing her thing. And part of me still expects to see her at things like this. Suffice it to say, I am really very pleased that the library has gone out of its way to commemorate her in this fashion, and we'll see something following me shortly, and again in the spring, because if there is any institution that could fully appreciate what she's meant to the industry and the community, it's a library. And I'd like to believe that her memory and her passion for books will live on in this place. Even with all the other stuff, Bill, we'll still always have books. Thank you.
Please welcome Committee Chair Candace Savin to introduce the 2024 Westport Prize for Literature Award.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. I am extremely pleased to be here today to present the second annual Westport Prize for Literature. This prize, which celebrates outstanding original works of fiction that explore issues in contemporary society, was originally conceived as a juried book award that has broad-based community participation. And it's especially fitting that the presentation of this award follows what we've just had as a very moving tribute to Sybil Steinberg. I spoke to Sybil on the phone not long before she passed, and we talked about this award, and she had agreed to be part of our jury and was thrilled at the idea of a literary prize in Westport. She knew, as I do, that Westport is a community of voracious readers filled with avid fans of literary fiction and thoughtful takes on contemporary life. This year, we had a wonderful response to our call for readers from the community. About 40 people participated by reading and reviewing submissions. Too many to call out individually, but a huge collective thank you to the members of the community that helped us read the books. And I also want to thank the members of our jury, book blogger and aggregator Suzanne Leopold, publishing industry veteran Erica Melnichuk, nonfiction writer and former Book of the Month Club judge Nina Sankovic, and Charlotte Rogan, author of The Lifeboat, all fellow Westporters. Finally, thanks to my fellow steering committee members, Allison Hoffman, Maggie Mudd, and Patra Kanchanagam, and to the library staff who have worked with us to make this idea a reality. This award and its $10,000 prize is meant to support great literature and reflect and sustain the rich literary life of Westport. The prize winner this year is Freedom is a Feast by Alejandro Poyana. The book is a multi-generational saga of love and revolution set in the author's native Venezuela. A recent review in the New York Times praised Mr. Poyana for squeezing, quote, adventure, even dark comedy from misery and horror, and called the book a passionate indictment of Venezuelan strongman Hugo Chavez. This story, set in the upheavals of Venezuela over the last decades, makes the political personal and sheds light on a crisis that remains in the headlines. Mr. Poyana is here with us today to accept the award and speak about his book, and he'll be signing books after in the Kamansky room right behind here. And so without further ado, Alejandro Poyana, please come up to accept the award. Congratulations. And this is a certificate. Okay, congratulations.
Wow, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Westport Library, to Candace, to the award committee, anybody that took the time to read the book, and thank you, everyone that's here. I am just extremely honored. As some of you might know, Venezuela is going through a lot in the past few years, and even in the past few months. We just had a very important election in July where millions of people came out to vote wanting a change of years of oppression, dictatorship, hardships. And the decision of the people in power was to keep power and not give room for this change. So the fact that the book is being honored in this way at this moment feels particularly special to me, and I am so grateful for that. I figured I would read a few pages of the book. I'm gonna read from, so the book takes place over about 50 years of Venezuelan history, starting in the 60s with the rise of the left in Venezuela, and ending in 2012, 2013, when Chavez is dying of cancer. It tries to tell the story, the complex story of Venezuela and why we are in the moment that we are now. But it tells it through the story of this family, that a man and a woman that fall in love as guerrilla fighters in the 1960s in the jungles of Venezuela, and the political circumstances of the country tears them apart. And the book tries to answer the question of, are we going to take the opportunities that life gives us to reconnect and to mend old wounds, even when the country itself seems to be conspiring against us. So this scene that I'm gonna read takes place in 1998. Hugo Chavez is running a historic election campaign. The people are really behind him, looking for a change from years, especially poor people and working class people, from years of being neglected. And this is from the point of view of Emiliana, that young revolutionary that falls in love in the jungles. She's a single mother now, and she has a grandson, Eloy. And she's very sick with cancer, and it's her last chance to go cast a vote for somebody that she really believes in. So we are going out to vote with them at this moment. And so they moved together in a chain, Eloy pulling his grandmother pulling her daughter. Emiliana was no longer disappointed that Maria wasn't more like her, but she was afraid. Afraid that Maria wouldn't be strong enough to do things on her own after she died. The seniors' line was long and hardly unusual, was moving more slowly, but eventually they made it through. Emiliana handed the man at the table her cédula de identidad and signed the election book. Your right thumb right here, the man said, and presented her with the ink sponge. Emiliana pressed down that satisfying wetness and made her mark next to her name. The man gave her a ballot. Where does mine go? Eloy asked. Eloy is the grandson. The poll worker winked at Emiliana. We have a special book for first-time voters, he said, and pulled a small notebook from a pack by his side. He opened it to a blank page. Write your name right here. Eloy wrote it carefully, tongue sticking out the side of his mouth. And now your thumb, please, sir, the man said. Eloy was ecstatic as he left his tiny imprint in the man's notebook. I voted, he yelled. No, honey, Emiliana said. Not yet. We're going to do that next. Eloy looked at him confused. Go, Eloy. Go with your abuela. Go vote. Maria shoved him gently and started filling out her own form. Emiliana and Eloy walked hand in hand to the booth. She showed Eloy the ballot, which depicted all the political parties, 36 in total, and the faces of the candidates the party supported. Why are there so many Chavez? Eloy said. Which one do we vote for? Emiliana explained that each square represented a political party, and each party supported one candidate for president. So they were not just voting for president, but also for a political party. Mark right here on this one, she said, pointing to the MVR party square. Fill the circle nice and dark, okay? Eloy filled the bubble. Now we fold it like this, she said. You want to put it in the box? Yes. They exited the booth and walked to the ballot box. Emiliana picked Eloy up. She hadn't done it in months and was surprised, thankful that she still could. Eloy slipped the folded ballot in the slot on his first try. When he looked at her, Emiliana thought she would be blinded. He lit up so bright. Now we dip our pinkies, she said. Eloy was confused again. What? Emiliana pointed to the poll workers, making sure everyone dipped their pinky fingers in ink. It's the last step, she said, so everyone knows you voted, and you can't go vote again somewhere else. It keeps everything fair. Emiliana dipped her finger, and Eloy did the same. His fingernail turned a deep blue, almost black. You did it, Emiliana said, and embraced him. His little legs hugged her torso, and he nuzzled his face in her neck. She inhaled, took him in, hugged him so tight. She hoped this wouldn't be the last time she could hold him like this, but she didn't know. So she let the moment last as long as her arms would allow. Thank you. I like that scene a lot. Emiliana became my favorite character. She was a late character to the book, actually. She didn't have any point of view sections for a very long time, and through the editing process, she was always a character that I loved so much. And when I knew that I was really going to explore what Chavez meant to people at that time and what his regime later became, I knew that I had to give her a louder voice. And in a time where we just had elections in Venezuela and we've got elections coming up here, I just felt it was an important piece to read. The book came about in a very different way for me. The origin of the novel, I started writing it about 10 years ago. When my brother was in his early 20s, I already lived in the United States. I had come to Austin to do a master's degree at that time in advertising. I wasn't a writer yet. And my brother was kidnapped back home for the second time, actually, when he was in his 20s. He was held hostage by some criminals, and it took many hours of police negotiations. And thankfully, my brother was okay after going through a very bad ordeal. And when he called me later that night to explain to me what had happened, I was so shocked and saddened and frightened for him and for my family and for what could have happened. But part of his story really surprised me. During his time being held, him and one of the criminals that was there sat down and had a really long conversation. The man was very apologetic, very ashamed. He told my brother he had never done anything like this. And that part of his story really moved me and stayed with me for a long time. At that same moment, I was wrestling with my own identity in Austin. I missed Venezuela tremendously, but I also felt angry at the country, at the state that it was in. I feel like I was slowly removing myself from the life of the country after being really obsessed about everything that was going on. I was hitting a stage where I just couldn't pay attention, couldn't hear anything that was going on back home. And this story eventually led me back to it. A few years after it happened, I started writing about that experience that my brother had, and I wrote it from the point of view of the kidnapper, I think as a way to try to understand why a man would do something like that, a man that apparently, had never done it before and all these things. And that was the entry point for this book. I used it, I started with Eloy as a young man, and then the book exploded from there, and it allowed me to try to wrestle with my own identity as a Venezuelan, wrestle with my own identity as a writer. And now it's here, and I'm so thankful for everyone that's here to read it, to share it with your friends and loved ones, and to learn a little bit more about the country that I love through these characters that I hope you get to love as well. So thank you very much, everyone.